sit down and fasten your seatbelts. Would you please close this door? Behind closed doors. Thank you all for coming. I don't see a better time to spend Monday evening. Boring Mondays. Well, let me tell you a little bit about the Council, the Financial Policy Council. We're not a political organization. We're not here talking neither Republican nor Democrats. We're here to make change, affect change. And the way you affect change is by being a problem solver. Lots of guys out there, from the media pundits to the politicians to the bullshit artists, who talk non-stop. We're not here for that. We're here to know exactly the truth, what's happening to the economy, fiscal policy, monetary policy, and propose solutions. Discuss, debate, brainstorm solutions. This is not a forum for, general information. We're going to debate some very important issues. Some issues that you don't read in the press, in the media. Every speaker we bring in is special. Whether from the political world, from the business world, from Silicon Valley, from Wall Street, etc. Our topic, the topic this evening will revolve around why there is no bottom inside for housing. Look, everybody, you go read the press, everybody talks about a rosy future. The future is not rosy, let's admit it. I'm not talking here as a pro-Romney or as an anti-Obama or anything like that. These are the facts. So we're going to get to know the facts, and then the Q&A will be not just to ask the speaker questions, but to propose solutions. Start thinking, being proactive. That's how you create wealth, and that's how you make change. And our mandate, and the biggest revenge against the people who are here to appropriate and redistribute your wealth, is to make obscene wealth. And you make obscene wealth by getting the right information, the proper information, the proper intelligence. Gathering the right intelligence. Mistakes are done because they are based on wrong information. This is our mandate, this is what we're here for. There is no think tank in the country that addresses just the fiscal monetary policy issues and exposes the truth. They tell you things that are really correct, that are pro-Republican or pro-Democrats. We are truth seekers. And based on that, we want to empower everyone to make obscene money, to give us more money for the organization. Our speaker tonight is Keith Jurow, who's an expert in real estate. He has written extensively on the subject matter. And he's going to talk to us about the future of real estate, the opportunities out there, and how do you create wealth in such a market. Ladies and gentlemen, Keith Jurow.
Now I'm going to use this.
Oh, you have a speaker. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ziad. I appreciate that. It's really a pleasure to be here with such a distinguished group of opinion leaders. Now, some of you may be, I should mention the fact that I write Minionville's housing market report. Some of you may be a little concerned about that title. So I want to assure you that I'm not here to frighten you. I'm here to tell you the truth, so you and your colleagues can make smarter real estate decisions. The period 2004 through 2007 was the greatest speculative credit bubble in our history, much greater even than the stock market bubble of 1927 through 1929. I want to show you some charts that will illustrate what madness was taking place during that period. Just go to the first one. Go all the way back. And just hit that. Is that? Okay. Thanks. The chart on top comes from the data provider CoreLogic. And it shows, interesting, the percent for three major counties, Orange County in California, Miami-Dade, and Clark County, where Las Vegas is situated, the percentage of homes sold during those years that were flips, defined by the researcher as those previously bought within the last 2 years. And you can see the high percentage even going back as early as 2000. But then 2004 and 5, the height of the speculative bubble, it was more than 40% of all homes sold, for example, in Clark County, Las Vegas, were flips. Those who bought previously with the speculators with the sole intention of flipping them for a profit. But this took place for a period of 5 years, and 2004, 5, and then 6 were the peak. That's amazing. 40% of all the homes were bought by speculators for the purpose of flipping. This other chart down below is a confirmation. It came out of the New York Federal Reserve Bank in last fall. And it shows the same thing. These were those who bought properties during those years where there was more than one first lien on the credit report of that person. And the researchers assumed, I think for the most part accurately, that if they had more than one first lien, that second property was bought for investment or speculation. And notice, the one on the left is nationwide. So it's 35% in 2006. Of all homes nationwide were bought by somebody who had more than one first lien in his credit report. Speculators, oh, they could have been investors, but they certainly were either investors or speculators not buying to live in. That's nationwide. It wasn't just something for the 4 states that we all talk about, although those figures are on the right. These are Arizona, Nevada, Florida, and California. And you can see there during the peak of 2006, 45% of all the properties were bought by somebody who had more than one first lien. Again, investors, speculators not buying to live in those properties. So when I use the term speculative madness, that's what it was. It wasn't simply people buying because they thought they could make a little money, but intending to live there. No, these were speculators. Let me give you an example. I wrote an article where talking about this 22-year-old in Phoenix who had managed to amass 15 properties by 2005. The banks gave him mortgages for 15 properties. He borrowed from his friends and his family when he ran out of his own down payment. When asked by the reporter for Fortune, I think Fortune magazine in 2005, they don't cash flow, aren't you concerned? And he said, no, I'm in it for the appreciation. The pure speculator's answer. I wonder how many properties he has left. I suspect not a single one. But it wasn't just speculation by those buying properties to sell them, flip them quickly for a profit. Hardly anybody has written about home equity lines of credit. But during those bubble years of 2004 through 2006, let's say, the banks shoveled out home equity lines of credit, second liens to anybody, remember those years? To anybody who was breathing. Because properties were going up at double-digit values and nobody seemed to care. So These numbers are from Equifax, these charts. The average home equity line of credit taken out was, for the last 6 years, has been about $100,000. But in California, it's different. They took them out for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 and refied them once or twice. Much of the refinance numbers that you see are actually refinances of second liens, not first liens. It was insane. But who cared when the prices were going up like that? Look at these numbers. I don't know how well you can see, but like for 2006, 3.4 million, I call them HELOCs for short. HELOCs were originated, 2005 was about the same, 2006 was a little less. I mean, people were doing this to take cash out of that piggyback bank. Remember those times? And, but nobody really is keeping track of what about the ones that are still on the books. Turns out, just scroll it. This also is from Equifax. At the peak, there was almost 15 million HELOCs were outstanding. People who had second liens in addition to their first. And then came the downturn. It's now down to, because the banks have written off a lot of them, it's now down to a mere 11.5 million second liens, home equity lines of credit that are on the books. Oh, let's not forget, there was also 4.5 million, there are still remaining 4.5 million home equity installment loans where you pay monthly, unlike the HELOC, which was interest only until next year when they convert to fully amortizing 15-year mortgages. That's going to be interesting. So you add the two together, that's 16 million second liens outstanding. I venture to say that 95 to 98% of them are totally underwater. But when you read those reports, like from CoreLogic and elsewhere, about how many of them, how many mortgages, how many houses are underwater? Oh, about 10 million. Oh, really? With 15 million second liens, all of those houses, for the most part, underwater, you think it's only 10 million? No way, because it's very hard to compare first and second liens and put them together on the same property. So they don't. They just take a look at first liens. You cannot disregard the second lien problem. These numbers are just mind-boggling. You know, there are properties that, I won't tell you stories, but there are properties that, where they keep, in California especially, but not just California, Florida too, and some other places, where they would refi the first, then take out a HELOC, refi that, refi the first. It just went on because the banks would shovel out the money. Not so much fun anymore, but it was fun while it lasted, right? Okay, what did this lead to? It led to a price bubble. That's Phoenix. That was specially made for me by FNC, which has the best housing index, much better than Case-Shiller, because they have a database of about 45 million appraisals. So they can do things that nobody else can do. For example, this is just houses 1,500 to 3,000 square feet. I asked them to do a price index for Phoenix. They can do that because they have the square footage information on those appraisals. And there it is. You see 2004. My pointer doesn't work too well on this. Otherwise, I would use my, my nice pointer. 2004 to the summer of 2006. You see that? That's the bubble. When prices were going up at double-digit rates until the summer of 06. And then what happened? All of the speculators said, oh, this can't last. I better dump my condo or whatever on the market. They all threw it on the market at the same time. The inventory of homes soared. That was the end. And you can see what happened. Prices collapsed. Everybody was putting it on the market. The banks were forced to foreclose on those speculators. And then in the spring of 09, the banks around the country, not just Phoenix, said, we can't do this. Remember, it's the credit crisis of 2008, 2009. We can't do this. The prices are collapsing. So they cut back on their foreclosures and the sale of foreclosures, and things began to level out, even in Phoenix. That's because the banks said, we just can't let this go on. So they stopped, slowed it down. When I get to New York, you'll see that the banks, they slowed it down about 3 years ago and it never picked up. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Because you'll see a little leveling, and some of you skeptics are probably wondering, Doesn't that look like a housing bottom? Come on, Keith. You see that little? Well, I'll talk about why that shows up like that, even on FNC's chart. But that was the collapse of what took place in the craziest bubble states. So the problem is much bigger than just how many houses might be foreclosed. There are property, the banks stopped foreclosing in the spring of '09. New York City, the banks have not foreclosed for 3.5 years. I mean not, I'll show you some numbers in a minute. I got these by spending 4 months on the telephone with the New York State Department of Banking. My contact I can't reveal because he'll get in trouble. These numbers are being revealed for the first time tonight, right here. Nobody else in the country has these numbers because they have not been published. The law in New York State required that all mortgage servicers had to send what was called a pre-foreclosure notice to delinquent owner-occupants, informing them that they could be foreclosed and what you can do about it. And then they had to send all of those numbers into the Department of Banking. And this is the recording of all of those numbers. Then they stopped publishing them in October of 2010. So I spent 4 months on the phone trying to get, could you just give me the numbers for New York City, Nassau, and Suffolk County? And he said yes. Now what do they show? Take a look at some of the numbers by borough, Suffolk and Nassau. Look at Nassau County. Through the first quarter, 104,000 owner-occupants are seriously delinquent. Most of these have not even been put into the first stage of foreclosure. It comes to 192,000 seriously delinquent properties in New York City that have not yet been foreclosed. Long Island is 175,000. Well, let's see. There are about, from the New York Federal Reserve Bank, there are about 730,000 first liens in all of New York City. Who's the best math person here? Oh, that's only owner-occupants. They didn't have to send it to investors. So I'd say just roughly, maybe tack on another 70,000 of delinquent investor-owned properties in New York. What does that come to? 260,000? What's 260,000 divided by 730? About 30% of all of the first liens in New York City are seriously delinquent, some of them for 2 or 3 years. Why would you pay your mortgage when you know the banks are not foreclosing? People are not stupid. The scary thing is that the numbers for the first quarter of 2012 are the highest since 2 years ago. It's not like it's dwindling and and winding down. It's not. So those numbers are higher now, 2 months later. Long Island, it's closer, it's more than a third. There are only about 530,000 first liens in Nassau and Suffolk County. So tack on maybe another 40 or 50,000 investor-owned properties on Long Island. That's 175 and 50, let's say 225. What's 225 divided by 530? 40%. 40% of all of, did you ever hear that before? 40%, and these numbers are accurate because by law, the mortgage servicers have to send those numbers in to the Department of Banking. 40% of all of the first liens in Long Island are seriously delinquent, most of which have not even been placed in lease pendants, the first stage of foreclosure. That's, I hate to use the term scary because I just said I wasn't here to frighten you, right? Mind-boggling. The number grows, and it has serious consequences when you think about it, because I've been writing for 2 years that sooner or later, I never put a date on it, sooner or later the banks will have to begin foreclosing on these properties, or at least doing short sales. They're not even doing that. They just sit. And what's going to happen when the banks start doing that? Well, use your imagination. I'll tell you a little later what I think when I recommend specifics of what I suggest that you might want to do here in the New York metro area. Even I was shocked when I saw those numbers. Although I had written extensively about Queens, it didn't surprise me. 684,000 of them in the entire state. It's not just New York and Long Island, although, of course, they're the worst. Some of them, See, people walk away from the mortgage. They don't walk away from the house. They stay in the house. They live rent-free for 2, 3, 4 years. They're not stupid. They walk away from the mortgage. They stay in the house. They say, go ahead, evict me. I know that you're not doing that, so I'll just stay, save up enough money for another house, which I'll buy, but not before I'll buy that property before I default. There are some people who do that. They buy the property because they don't have a default on their record, and then they default on the house that they've been living in for 3 years. I mean, it's sad for the people who are paying their mortgages, but this is what's going on. Now, I'm spending time on this because this is really important. People think New York prices have held up pretty well, right? I grew up in Queens. You know, the median selling price is still about $340,000 in Queens. The same house that lists for $450,000 in Queens sells in Phoenix for, what do you think? 50. Give me a number. 45. 60 to 90. The same house. Why? Because in Phoenix, they've been foreclosing for years, pushing the prices of everything down. In New York and Long Island, they haven't been doing that. So you can list your property in Queens, in Bayside, for example, for $450,000, and you have no competition from the foreclosures. Of course, nobody buys it. Queens has 2.2, I shouldn't laugh, but Queens has 2.2 million people. You know how many houses sell in Queens every month? About 600. Phoenix sells 8,500. Because they're loaded with distressed properties, the prices have plunged, and it took me a while to figure out what was going on until I realized it's the banking foreclosure or non-foreclosure situation. That's the key to understanding New York, Long Island, Connecticut, Bergen County, in northern, the whole New York metro is what, 19 million people. It's important to know these things. Apparently, I'm the only one who's digging into this to try to tell you what's really going on. Let's see. There are 175,000 seriously delinquent owner-occupant properties in Long Island. Oh, here's from the Long Island report, real estate report. How many foreclosure filings? This is monthly. Can you see it? Never got more than 2,000 in any month. Look where it is now. About 700 foreclosure filings. This is 2 counties with almost 3 million people. 700 foreclosure filings. Who wants to figure that one out? How long would it take to go through the 175,000 delinquent properties that have not yet been put in foreclosure? This is what's going on in Long Island. Well, I asked the publisher, what's those red things? You know what they are? Refilings. What's a refiling? After 3 years, the law in New York State is you have to refile the original foreclosure filing because it expires. So those red ones are those that have been living in the house rent-free for more than 3 years. And the attorney for the lender had to go and refile the foreclosure. This still hasn't been foreclosed, it's just a foreclosure filing. This is what's going on in Long Island. And you have to understand this in order to understand where the housing markets are headed. Because you look at this and you say, this is Nassau and Suffolk. That's not so bad, is it? Doesn't look like Phoenix, right? Not as bad as Phoenix. Of course not. The banks don't foreclose, so you can list it for whatever you want in New York or Long Island. Every once in a while, I use the analogy of the Venus flytrap. Every once in a while, some naive buyer doesn't realize that he shouldn't be paying $450,000 for that house, but he does, because he doesn't know any better, and he hasn't read my writings. Not many, though. Long Island, each county, they sell about 600 to 700 houses. I mean, that's the difference. Okay. Some of you may like to pass one out. You know, for those of you who like to see the numbers, these are my notes of what's going on. What's going on in, this was Sunday. See, I have no life because I do this 60 hours a week. Sunday, I decided to check out what kind of foreclosures were going on in New York City. So take a look at the number on the right. In Queens, 2.2 million people, 283 foreclosures were for sale on the MLS. 283. Brooklyn, which is bigger, 2.5 million people, has 78 properties on the market. No wonder you have a hard time looking for foreclosures if you are. How many are scheduled for sheriff sales, foreclosure sales? Queens, 55. Brooklyn, 20. That's it. Oh, I shouldn't, to be fair, you know, I live in Connecticut, so Fairfield County had 246, but only 32 scheduled foreclosure sheriff sales. Fairfield County has more than 800,000 people. Anybody here from New Jersey? Okay. Bergen County, population almost 900,000, had 108 foreclosure properties on the MLS and 184 sheriff sales. Wow. But let's compare that to Maricopa County, which is where Phoenix is, and this has been dropping. It used to be much more. On Sunday, 6,691 foreclosure properties for sale in Maricopa County, and over 5,000 sheriff sales auction, and they're down a lot. See the difference? And even in Phoenix, they're trying to cut back by and try to calm the housing markets by cutting back seriously on the foreclosure sales and on those that are have been foreclosed that are on the MLS. They're trying to do that all over. Look, you can see it here. At the height of the collapse, these are the percentage of homes in Maricopa County that were foreclosure sales. 2/3 back in the spring of '09 were foreclosure properties that were sold on the MLS. You see how it's been dropping? Now I get this. This was developed for me by Leif Swanson, who was a broker out in Phoenix, who I speak to all the time. It's down to 14%. Only 14% of all the homes sold in May were foreclosures. They're really trying to cut back on foreclosure sales, thinking that will solve the problem. Do I think it will solve the problem? No. Because you still have the delinquency problem. One more, just scroll down. These are short sale listings. A year ago, it was over 11,000. Now it's under 1,000. They've cut back on the properties they're putting up on short sale listings, but they're still very attractive, so they're buying them up, and the listings have just collapsed. Go back to the Phoenix chart for 2 pages, back to that, remember that Phoenix, the other one. Go, one more. One more, go back one more. Let's take another look at Phoenix. There you go. Isn't it bottoming? Even FNC's index is affected by the lack of foreclosure sales because they're the ones that are discounted the most. And so if you eliminate them or you reduce the number of foreclosure sales, that's going to increase the average price of homes sold. And that affects this here. Does that mean that prices are bottoming and leveling out in Phoenix? No. It just means that the foreclosure sales have been removed from that index. But people are fooled by that. They don't do the kind of research that I've been doing to figure out what's really going on there. Okay, one more. Let's go to the last. What's really going on in Connecticut, where I live? Ravis.com, the largest brokerage firm in the Northeast, in 6 states plus Westchester. The last one. Go ahead. They have statistics on real sales, no indexes here. These are raw numbers. Sales in 6 states. I spent 2 weeks going through the figures because they're the only brokerage firm that has it. These are sales, average price per square foot from February through April of this year compared to a year earlier. Take a good look. Anybody here from Connecticut? One. No. Two. Well, sort of. Okay. Look at Fairfield County, the Gold Coast, Greenwich and Darien and New Canaan, places like that, down almost 11% year over year. The whole state is down 10%. There are nice towns there that are down 20% year over year. Madison, a nice town on Long Island Sound, down 20% year over year. I gave a talk at my college reunion a year ago at Cornell, and I warned them then, think about selling your house now. Well, if they lived in Connecticut, in one of those towns, if they didn't do it, which I suspect they didn't, their property's worth 20% less than it was a year ago. Even I was a little surprised to see these numbers. It's across the board. If you scroll down a little more, he has numbers for Massachusetts and the other Northeast states. Oh, look, Cambridge is up 12.8, just so you didn't think I was looking only for the negative ones. But Cambridge is the place where MIT is and Harvard, and they don't fire people there. So it's a little unrealistic. But yes, I did find one town where the year-over-year price was up. This is what's going on. I don't look at Case-Shiller. I don't waste my time with that because it's an index and I know what goes into it. These are raw numbers. That's my world, the world of real sales, real prices. That's what I do. Go to, minimize that. Just minimize that one, yeah, and then bring up the other.
Key talking points?
Yeah. Why is there no housing bottom in sight? I just did this last night, so I couldn't include it on the major handout, but I wanted you to have it because I want to walk you through it quickly. There is a growing imbalance between buyers and sellers. The number of potential buyers and homes for sale is expanding, and the number of potential buyers is shrinking. Doesn't sound good, but I wanted to walk you through it. There are foreclosed homes in terms of the rising number of potential home sales. There are foreclosed homes now held off the market by the banks, which will have to come on the market sooner or later. There is that real shadow inventory of seriously delinquent properties that the banks have not foreclosed, such as in New York. But it's elsewhere besides New York. That's just the one place I have solid numbers. They're coming on the market sooner or later. I don't have a timetable. There are a lot of homeowners who pulled their houses off the market. You know, the inventory is down. People are saying, you know, maybe the market is bottoming, and if I pull it off, I'll wait and put it back in this next spring when it's stronger. Big mistake, but that's what they're doing. Those properties are going to come back on the market too at some point, if they can, if they're not too far underwater. What about all those modified mortgages? We have statistics that show anywhere from 30 to 50% go default again. And they go through the same process of, so some of those are going into foreclosures. We don't know what percentage. And then there are those who will continue to walk away as the prices sink further. We don't know what that number is. We do have some pretty good figures on those who default, who strategically default. They can afford the mortgage, but they walk away because they're too far underwater. As prices continue to sink, they will do that in bigger numbers. Okay, just scroll. Now what about the buyers? Oh, here's where it gets really ugly. The trade-up buyer, remember the heart and soul, the foundation of the old market? You buy a house, it goes up in price, you take that money and you throw it into a bigger house, more expensive, but you have a bigger down payment. That trade-up buyer is gone. He has no equity left in his house. He can't do that. That leaves the market to first-time buyers and investors. But Fannie Mae requires a 30% down payment. How many people can afford a 30% down payment, especially the first-time buyers? And then there are those, the qualification is high. It takes over 700 before they'll even look at you in terms of a FICO score for many banks. And then the debt to income. During the good old days, you could have a debt to income ratio of 60%. You were in debt up to your eyeballs. They'd still give you the mortgage. Not anymore. 35, 38%, that's about it. How many people are going to qualify with those standards? 4, That's the scariest of them all. I read and write about this all the time. There are a growing number of renters who can afford to buy. You know what they're saying? I have a feeling that the housing prices could go lower, so I'm going to wait. I like the flexibility that renting provides. Now that is deadly for any market, whether it's the stock market or a housing market, when you have people who could buy, who think that it's headed lower and hold off. You see how that feeds on itself? The lower prices go, the more of those potential buyers just sit tight and wait. And that's what's happening now in growing numbers. Scary. That is truly scary. And then, of course, you have the all cash buyers. There are some people who say, all cash buyers, they're going to rescue the housing market. How many people really believe there are enough all cash buyers to rescue any housing market in this country? Okay. Good. I agree with you. There aren't enough. Oh, yes, they're in Phoenix, and they're in Las Vegas, and they're in South Florida. That's where they're going, but they're going there because the prices are $50,000. $50,000 to $80,000. You can buy a very nice house in half of South Florida. But not here. Not here in the Northeast. Okay? Now you take a look at those numbers and go home and reflect on them, and you'll see this growing imbalance. It's getting worse. Let me just close with specifics. What's my advice for, you in the Northeast? No. The New York metro area. That includes New Jersey, Connecticut, New York City, Long Island, Westchester even. Potential buyers. What about you? Thinking of buying. Maybe the housing market is bottoming. My advice to you, don't. Sit tight and wait 6 to 12 months and reassess. Time is on your side. I'm quite sure the markets will be uglier then. But just time is on your side. Sit tight and wait. Okay, what about the worried homeowners? Doesn't matter when you bought, you're just worried. How low is it going to go? For you, I suggest you may want to think about taking your house, getting it appraised, and perhaps putting it on the market. Because when the banks start foreclosing and doing short sales in New York City, Long Island, Bergen County, northern New Jersey, and Connecticut, prices will collapse. Not decline, collapse. Just do the numbers, in terms of what I've been showing you. I don't think there's anything that can turn that around. I know somebody who bought, against my suggestion, of an expensive home on Long Island, probably $1.5 million. How is he going to feel when 2 to 3 years from now that property has been cut in half in value? I'm assured that that's going to happen in no more than 3 years in the entire New York metro than I am that the sun will come up tomorrow morning. Now, you can call that a prediction or not. I don't like making predictions, but I'm just confident because I see where we're headed, and I don't see anything to turn that around. So give it some thought. What's wrong with renting a nice house or a nice condo, sitting it out during this, my last article, this perfect storm that's coming? Something to think about, okay? How are you going to feel if in 2 to 3 years your house, no matter when you bought it, is worth half of what it's worth now? Something to think about. This is 1930. I'll end with this. This is 1930. The stock market peaked in October of 29 at almost 400. See, I know the stock market too. It peaked at almost 400. I'm not going to make any predictions about the banking system, but this credit bubble was bigger than the stock market of 1929. All speculative bubbles, massive bubbles, end disastrously. Why should this be any different? I can't think of any good reason. I'm a historian, so I wish you all well in terms of your own real estate decisions, and I hope that this has helped, at least given you the information so you can make wiser real estate decisions. Thank you.